On an autumn evening in 2012, something happened in the small town of Silverite that would shock all its residents. 6-year-old Rose disappeared while playing in the park near her parents' house. Her parents, Julia and Thomas, were busy with gardening in their backyard and didn't notice when their daughter left the property. When they returned to the house, Rose was nowhere to be found. At first, they thought she had gone to a friend's house, but by evening, when she didn't return, the family started to panic. The police arrived on the scene immediately and began searching the area. Local residents gathered volunteers to help, but despite their efforts, no trace of the girl was found. The situation became even more unsettling when it was revealed that there were no witnesses and no one had seen Rose leave the park. It made no sense. After several hours of investigation, it became clear that something much stranger was behind her disappearance. Several days after Rose's disappearance, strange rumors started circulating in the town. Some witnesses claimed to have seen Rose in different places, but each time it was under bizarre circumstances. One elderly neighbor of Julia and Thomas said that on the day of the disappearance, he saw a little girl, who resembled Rose, in the park. However, what was unusual was that she was accompanied by a woman in dark clothing with a hood, who moved as if not from this world. Other townspeople claimed to have heard strange sounds, like a child's laughter, late at night. But when they went outside, there was no one to be seen. One woman even reported finding Rose's toys in her garden the next morning, though she had never seen how they got there. The local police began searching for any possible clues, but these strange testimonies only increased the sense of uncertainty. Fear gripped the town, and the search for Rose became increasingly desperate. Detective Michael Harris, who took over the investigation into the disappearance, began searching for answers in the most unexpected places. When traditional methods of finding the girl proved fruitless, he started going through the old town records related to paranormal events. Harris stumbled upon a book that mentioned incidents that had occurred in the town several decades ago. It talked about the unexplained disappearances of children in Silverite. Some local residents believed that Rose's disappearance was tied to parallel worlds. The town's elderly folks spoke of an old forest on the edge of town, where, according to them, one could see cracks in reality, rifts between worlds. Harris delved into researching ancient myths that claimed some people could be taken to another world, only to return as ghosts after disappearing. These ideas began to influence the detective. He came up with his own theory that Rose had somehow ended up in one of these parallel worlds, and that it would take more than just a typical investigation to bring her back. A month after Rose's disappearance, a strange room was discovered in an old abandoned house that once belonged to the owners of a local sawmill. Investigators, including Detective Harris, went inside and found a small room with no windows, completely empty except for children's toys, stuffed animals, and crayon drawings. In the center of the room was an old chair with a dusty stuffed bear sitting on it. As they began to examine the room, one of the drawings caught their attention. It depicted a girl who looked just like Rose, but her eyes were pitch black, without pupils. The room itself gave off an eerie feeling, as if time had frozen, and everything in it was connected to an unfinished story. It was as if the room had been left as a trap, anticipating that someone would come searching. The investigators tried to find any explanations, but they couldn't. The discovery of this room only added more questions to the already unsolved mystery. Months went by, but the townspeople couldn't shake the memory of Rose's disappearance. One evening, when Harris and his team were conducting another night investigation, they noticed a figure that appeared to be a little girl standing by an old cemetery. Harris, acting on instinct, rushed to follow her. When he got closer, the girl disappeared, as though melting into the night air. Harris couldn't believe his eyes. He was certain he had seen Rose, but how could that be possible if she had been missing for months? This event marked a turning point in the investigation. Harris realized that the missing girl was no longer an ordinary human child. She was a ghost, a shadow, part of another world that was slowly merging with theirs. Harris's research led him to even older sources. He found a book of shadows, an ancient manuscript that described dark forces existing in this town and its surroundings. The book told of a cult that had existed centuries ago, using disappeared children in their rituals to cross into another world. Local legends suggested that this cult was built on ancient knowledge and magic hidden from the eyes of outsiders. As the years went by, their rituals became more dangerous, and children began to vanish, only to return as something dark and inhuman. Harris realized that Rose might have become a part of this terrifying history, and her disappearance could be part of an ancient ritual meant to bring something dark back into their world. The next morning, after Harris's encounter with the ghostly figure, his team discovered something strange on an old video camera. The footage, shot months before Rose's disappearance, seemed uneventful at first. However, upon closer inspection, the team saw something that sent chills down their spines. In one of the frames, at the park's entrance, they spotted a little girl playing on the path. Rose, as always, wore a bright dress and had a smile on her face. But what truly unsettled Harris was that for a brief moment, the camera captured something that didn't belong, a shadowy, dark cloud that began moving toward the girl. When the shadow touched her shoulder, Rose suddenly turned around, her eyes filled with an eerie, unnatural look. The camera then cut out, as if overwhelmed by some unseen force. After analyzing the footage, Harris realized that he wouldn't have seen these frames had he not insisted on checking the old camera. This footage was the last evidence of Rose's encounter with the otherworldly presence, and it showed that her disappearance was tied to something much more sinister than mere abduction. The town of Silverite grew more tense. Children were afraid to go outside. Whenever they played in the park, someone would hear footsteps or see strange shadows in the corners of the woods. The stories about a sinister creature that took children began to spread throughout the town. The place where Rose was last seen seemed to be particularly affected. One night, a local boy, who loved to play in the forest, claimed he saw a massive shadow moving between the trees. He said the shadow resembled a human figure, but its outlines were unclear, and its movements were unnaturally fast, almost supernatural. The boy was so terrified that after the encounter, he never returned to the forest again. People began to share their experiences, describing the eerie sensation that something, or someone, was watching them whenever they ventured into the woods. Even animals started to avoid the place, growling and whining whenever they were brought to the park or forest. As the fear spread, Harris gathered a team of paranormal investigators who claimed to have detected strange activity in the very same woods. They pinpointed certain areas of the forest as places where one could enter another world. For several nights, Harris stood at these strange spots, hoping to witness something. One night, he finally saw the shadow moving among the trees. It was not a creature, but more like a living void, bending the space around it. He was sure that what he saw was Rose, but not the Rose he remembered. She was no longer alive. She was a ghost, a shadow, a part of something much darker. The psychological state of Silverite's residents began to deteriorate. Each evening grew darker and more oppressive, and the nightmares seemed endless. Several people disappeared or were found wandering the streets with vacant, fearful expressions. In just a few weeks, several more people vanished, and the police could no longer explain what was happening. Rose remained at the center of it all. Both her image and her disappearance seemed connected to the horrors that were unfolding. People began to wonder if she had become part of some dark force that was now consuming the town. Harris, too, found himself under pressure, starting to question whether his investigation would ever yield answers. He witnessed unexplainable events and slowly shifted from a scientific approach to looking for mystical and magical answers. He began to understand that the town was not just cursed, it was trapped between worlds. Something far darker was at play, and Rose was now tied to it, just as the others who had disappeared. At the last night meeting, when everything seemed lost, Harris decided to face the dark force face to face. He knew that Rose was the key. And if she really was connected to this world and that world, then only she could reveal the secret of what was happening. He returned to the same old house where they had found Rose's toy room. It was here, in the silence of the night, that he felt the space around him begin to change. The air became viscous, and something that could not be described in words appeared in front of him. It was something dark, without shape, but it was alive, it was felt. It was part of something much scarier. And so, in the center of this anomaly, Rose appeared. But it wasn't a girl, but a creature whose eyes were empty and her body moved like a shadow. Harris realized that her soul had been consumed by this world and that she was now connected to it, just like the other missing children. Rose, in her last words, warned him, "Don't try to stop it. We are the beginning. They will come for everyone." The moment of that meeting changed Harris forever. He realized that the dark force that had taken over the city was not just a myth. It was the beginning of something that could not be stopped, forces that defy human understanding. And Rose has become a part of that force, now forever.